Hey guys, I'm Donnie Burles from Buffalo Eats, and you're listening to the first ever episode of Eat It Up. Every 2 weeks I'll have on a new guest who's connected to the food industry as either a writer, a blogger, a chef, a restaurant owner, whomever. It could even be a friend who's doing something cool in the community but loves food and loves to talk about food. Normally, this part of the podcast will be used as where I can talk about what's new on the site and what's new in Buffalo. Right now, since it's the start of the new year, basically we just have a bunch of year-end posts about 2011. You can check those out on the front page. I think they're pretty interesting, and I want to thank every one of you guys for making 2011 our best year we've ever had. Today, our guest is none other than Christa Glennie Seychew, probably Buffalo's most important foodie, and somebody I look up to and respect a lot. We had a really fun conversation a couple weeks ago, so sit back and enjoy our first podcast.
Me and 4 people.
You saw Jeff Buckley in Spot Coffee.
Nobody knew who he was.
Wow. Was it just one of his acoustic shows?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And it was like a Sunday at 4 in the afternoon.
Oh my god.
Anyway.
That's so awesome. That's such a... I mean, he's probably... I think his voice is maybe my top 5 favorite voices.
Have you noticed how many people, though, have albums coming out that are relatively new artists in the last 2 years who are totally ripping him off?
Yeah.
Sad.
And I cringe because Hallelujah is that one song that every American Idol, somebody does it as their audition thing, and they just destroy it, and it cuts at me. But yeah, I mean, I didn't find out about him until,
Well, how old were you in 1990? I don't even want to know. Or 1995. Anyway.
Yeah. So obviously I didn't know anything about him until 10 years after he passed away. But
I lived on Chippewa, so I got to do a lot of stuff. Spot was still very hip then.
Really?
There weren't any other spots. It was
That's awesome.
Anyway, sorry.
For the first ever edition of Eat It Up with Donnie Burles. That is the name that we've chosen. I'm talking today with Christa Glennie Seychew, who has one of the most impressive resumes of Buffalo foodies that I know. When I think of foodie culture in Buffalo, the first person I think of is Christa. And just to go over the resume, worked at Buffalo Rising, covered, hundreds of articles about restaurants in the area. Now works as the food editor at Buffalo Spree. Is the founder-owner of Feed Your Soul, which does events like Nickel City Chef, which has been hugely successful, the Nickel City Cake Challenge, does farmer market tours, does private events I've seen on the thing, and I've been jealous. I've seen, it says private chocolate something, and I'm like, oh my god, I probably don't want to know what that is because I'm going to be jealous. She just released a cookbook DVD that I actually just watched the DVD last night to prepare myself for this, and it was very well done. Has appeared in Buffalo Niagara's Eat It Up video when they're making a tourism type of video to showcase Buffalo's food culture, I guess you could say, with Nelson Starr. And you just recently spoke on behalf of the food trucks at our little council meeting. And you actually helped save a food truck. You had a part in saving the food. I'm not sure how much. I know that it's big enough that you're a free taco for life member, but you helped save Lloyd, which has been probably one of our. It's hands down the biggest food truck, and it's I think changed the way people think of Mexican food in Buffalo.
I'd just like to say that the Taco for Life card is the number one thing that should be on that resume.
It's the number one thing that I'm jealous of.
Just put everything else aside. It's the free Taco for Life card that just trumps it all.
Oh my god. When you told me about that, I think I could not believe that there was such a thing. And that, because I've gotten to know Pete and Chris, and I'm fortunate that they occasionally will throw me a discount here or there, but Taco for Life, that is.
Oh, I work very hard not to abuse my Taco for Life card. I really do.
You don't show up every day?
No, maybe once a month at a stretch, and I order the same thing every single time. I definitely don't abuse my privileges. But I think that the reason why they gave me that card is because I believed in them before they maybe even totally knew they were worth believing in themselves. I hate to say that because they're so good at what they do.
Well,
but it was really early on.
Yeah.
So
now how long did you know that was coming before the start? Because I'm talked to Nick, who's a friend of Pete and Chris, who run Lloyd.
Right.
Pete
is Nick Baroni's brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law, yes.
Right.
I didn't know the exact, so I didn't want to mess it up.
That's okay.
Okay, but he told me how he brought the idea up to them once. He's like, hey, did you guys see this truck Kogi in Los Angeles, or Koji.
Koji, yeah, the Korean taco truck.
Yes, and he's like, I think this is really cool. I wish somebody was doing it in Buffalo. And then I guess they just were like, yeah, let's do it.
They ran with it.
Yeah, and so how early were you?
I can't be sure, but pretty early on. I mean, I know it was the dead of winter. I have to preface this by saying, Donnie, that I take 100 meetings a month with people who have the craziest ideas, and some of them are brilliant, but you can see that they'll have trouble finding funding or licensing or permitting, and some of them are completely daft, but they may have all the backing in the world. I take meetings with people because I want to see things happen.
Yeah. And I also, that is it. I mean, you are the first person I think of when I think of a new restaurant in the area. When I think of some new food thing, I think, first of all, Christa already knows about this.
That's not always true.
And what can she tell me about it? Because you have the inside track. I mean, I think you've built up your name to a point where a lot of people in Buffalo know that you maybe have your your fingers on the pulse of the food scene in Buffalo. I mean, you certainly know almost the majority of the very talented chefs in Buffalo.
Well, I think more than anything, it's just the circles that I run in, per se, and that people like to talk a lot in Buffalo. There aren't a lot of very well-kept secrets. And so when somebody is developing a business idea, they're definitely, especially if they're a newbie, flying it past people to see, if it takes wind. And I think that's how I find out about things as early as I do. And people get really drunk and say things they shouldn't say.
That's the best.
Which is a very common problem in the restaurant industry.
That is why I did offer you a beer before we started.
Thank you for that, Don. And I like sort of the organic way this conversation is going rather than trying to start exactly at the beginning. But I came on board, or I became aware of what Pete and Chris from Lloyd were trying to do when they were concerned about the issues with the city and navigating those issues, and also toying with the idea of doing local sourcing. And I will tell you that is how I meet a lot of new restaurants.
I mean, that has become kind of your mantra.
I didn't mean that to happen. I mean, I didn't start out that way. That all happened very organically. I had been at Buffalo Rising working as their food editor for well over a year when I sort of stumbled into a situation where it became very clear to me that we have, at the time I would have said, a lot of farms in the area, and that I knew my very prestigious chef friends who had lived all over the country and cooked all over the country really would have appreciated the quality of the food that was at this wholesale market I was at 4 a.m. And a light bulb just sort of went off, and I just saw myself as like this, octopus with lots of tentacles who could connect all these people who have no place to sell this amazing food, next to people who are complaining because they're paying top dollar for wilted basil in August that's getting shipped in from, 500 to 5,000 miles away.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Cool thing.
So, okay, let's briefly touch on the beginning of Christa.
Oh, God.
Now, you're actually not a Buffalo-born gal.
Correct. I am from Seattle.
Seattle, yes. Now, how did you make it out to here?
Okay, so my parents are both from rural families in Western New York. My dad is from Lewiston and my mother is from Alden.
Okay.
And when my dad went to Vietnam, he and my mother married and moved to the West Coast.
Okay.
And so I was born and raised out there.
Okay.
And then once I became older and my grandparents started to age, my parents decided to move back here. I was an adult.
Okay.
But when I saw the price of rent in Buffalo compared to what I was paying in Seattle, I went, oh my God, I have to give that a try. Because what's the worst case scenario? I would just come back and live in somebody's walk-in closet again, which is basically how people live in Seattle because the rent is so insane. So, and so I've been here since the very end of 1992.
Okay. Now, I mean, obviously you have a great deal of interest in food, and you certainly like quality ingredients and local ingredients and fresh. I mean, is this something that your parents instilled in you, or did you have a moment where you suddenly realized, like, oh my God, I love food.
Well, I grew up in the 70s, and so two things influenced me in some respect. Number one, most of my mother's cooking was absolutely awful. And so there was a great desire to seek out other sustenance once I became aware that there was such a thing. However, my parents did have a huge garden, and my mother baked bread from scratch and those sorts of things. So I was keenly aware of what food probably should be and where it came from and how much hard work it was and all of that sort of thing. But no, my obsession with food started with several PBS cooking shows when I was, like 12 or 13 years old.
I've watched many of those with my mom.
I saved up all my babysitting money to buy a garnishing kit when I was like in 8th grade. It was a done deal. Yeah,
that's pretty standoutish there. That's not the average, I guess, 8th grade.
Yeah, I remember watching The Frugal Gourmet and going upstairs, and he had made a lamb that's like cooked in paper. It's like a French technique where you cook in paper, and I couldn't find lamb or paper, so I used hamburger and freezer wrap and tried to make this dish myself. And that was definitely like 6th or 7th grade. I was very proud of myself. My mother thought I was insane.
But I mean, so were you always just somebody who would try anything? I mean, try any type of food? Because if you think about kids, most kids are afraid to try something new or different. You just didn't have that in you?
No, I mean, I didn't like onions. There were things I definitely didn't like when I was a kid. I wanted, like most kids want to be able to like see everything that's in something, so when you serve them stew, they're scared because what might be hiding under the... So I definitely had that to some extent, and our diet at home was pretty bland. We didn't go to restaurants. We didn't, I didn't have a lot of experience as a very young person, but I was very fortunate that several of my friends in grammar school, junior high, and high school were Asian, and so I was exposed early on to a lot of Asian food, and that sort of was part of what piqued my palate, along with seeing all this stuff on television that people were doing very differently than my mom did at home, and it just it's always been there. I mean, I clearly, if anybody's seen me, I clearly love to eat. I love food. But more than anything, food has been something that has just been very interesting. I think about the ethnic foodways associated with food and culture and the social mores around food. And I've always found all of that and sort of the anthropology of how we eat and what we eat. I just find all of that very interesting and always have.
Now, did you go to school for
I did.
cooking?
I went to culinary school very briefly. I don't like to talk about that because I'd like to pretend that I went to some fabulous culinary school, but I didn't. I went to a terrible community college style culinary school. And while I think that is an excellent road for somebody who knows what they want to do,
yes,
and for somebody who is on a path, for me, having grown up watching great French cooking, I wanted to be in there finessing fine dishes. I did not want to learn how to make like enough scrambled eggs for 400 people that are going to go on a steam table. Yeah. And I was really, really disappointed. Yeah. Had I been a little older, I think I would have been wiser and chosen to go to a different school, but at the time I was also supporting myself, and so I went to the school that seemed like I could manage supporting myself and working at the same and going to school at the same time. Yeah, and it wasn't the right thing.
Now, was that back in Seattle, or was that back here in Buffalo?
It's in Seattle.
Okay.
But it just wasn't the right thing for me.
Okay, and so you come to Buffalo.
Yeah.
And did you know what you wanted to do?
No, not at all. I really have spent most of my life working in restaurants, usually in grunt jobs, to be honest with you. I worked in retail management for a long time. I know that. Pays the bills.
I know that, yeah.
It pays the bills. And my favorite part of that was when I was a receiving dock supervisor, I was a forklift driver. Nice. I loved that job.
Nice.
I loved that job.
There is something about retail that if you're that kind of person who doesn't mind working when everyone isn't working, which I guess is the same thing with restaurants.
It is.
You can get sucked into it because it's like immediate gratification sometimes, and I don't know. It's just something that I worked in retail for 10 years, and I thought I was going to be a lifer.
Well, I love the process of running a business and managing people and having people love coming to their job and feeling like they know where they stand and what's expected of them and that they're part of a team. And I love all that stuff, and I still do. And I think it's sort of why I've been as successful as I have been.
You've been successful, you can say it.
So yeah, well, I don't know. But the hours and the corporate side of it was really not conducive to my liking. And I'm just a little bit of a rebel, I guess.
Okay. So I
can't believe we're talking about all this stuff. Oh my god.
So I guess let's fast forward then. Let's go to Buffalo Rising.
Okay.
When you took on a role at Buffalo Rising.
That was in like 2006.
Okay. Now when I'm a very recent foodie.
Yes, I know we've talked about this. I think it's hysterical and really cute, actually.
Yes, that like literally maybe 3 years ago, I was eating chicken fingers at every restaurant that I went to because I was just afraid of trying anything different.
So you're basically like 60% of the Western New York population.
Yeah. Yes. Very, very timid, very, very scared.
Right. Worried that somehow somebody will take them over mentally and emotionally by feeding them something horrifying.
And also having a weird type of association of I have to have this blue collar eating style because I live in a blue collar town. Like that I'm from Buffalo. Like everything's simple. Like I don't need to eat a fancy 10-course meal.
Right.
And I mean, which is a horrible thinking, but I and also just pure ignorance and being afraid of eating things.
Well, and that's what I think is it for a lot of people. I just see fear, which I don't. I have to say there have been a few things I've eaten in the last couple of years which have brought me. I feel at least trepidatious
brought you
about.
to almost your limit.
There's been a couple things, but I've been surprised every time.
Yeah,
and I think that I don't understand a total fear regarding food. Because the worst thing that happens is that you spit it out.
Exactly.
Right? So, like, it's just fear of the unknown. Because if you take people who are scared of something food-wise and who are not claiming that it's an allergy or that it's part of their religion or any kind of dietary issues, those are all legitimate issues. But I think there are a lot of people who will take their issues around food and label them with other things to get people to stop picking on them.
Yes.
And I think if you take one of those people and you really ask them questions about how they eat, why they eat what they eat, what makes them comfortable, and really try to get them to describe what they're scared of, they realize that all they're really scared of is the unknown.
Yeah. And you know what? I had a messed up way of thinking that I thought that different foods from different cultures, people ate them knowing it was gross, but they ate it anyways. It never occurred to me that like people around the world eat this because it's really good.
Right, like in China they love things that are really gelatinous and strange, and we would not typically enjoy that texture.
Yeah.
But it's what they actually like. And so you thought they ate it even though they knew it was gross?
Yes, I thought, No,
you thought Americans would eat it even though they knew... Wait.
No.
Wait.
I thought that the culture had gotten to a point where they had overcome the grossness and just ate it battled through. I know, it's the worst thinking. And so that's how I justified not eating things. I was like, well, it's gross. Like, everyone knows it's gross.
Right.
And I mean, it's not even like a crazy thing, like any gelatinous type of food or like something.
Right, I mean, it might be unpleasant to you, but it's not going to kill you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I know. And I don't know. I mean, and also if I'm in my, let's say, teenage years, and I don't have a lot of money, and I'm going out to a restaurant, I'd always be afraid that I'd order something that's like $30 and
then you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
I hear that more than anything, is that people don't want to go out and pay for a sitter and spend all this money and get all dressed up to look like fools because they don't know how to pronounce something that they're trying to order, or because they don't ask the right question to the waitron, or because they are worried that they will order something and then it won't be good.
Yes.
And I guess I can understand that.
Yeah.
But I think if the way most waiters and waitresses who work in fine dining restaurants would rather have you point at the menu if you can't pronounce it.
Yes.
I'll have number 4.
I've done that many times.
I'll have the beef instead of saying, I'll have the whatever the formal name of the dish is.
I've done a lot of pointing in Chinatown in Toronto.
Exactly. And I think that that most waiters and waitresses are happy to answer your questions if you're not a douche when you ask them. Exactly. If you act like, if you're like pulling a macho thing and trying to be ballsier than the staff person
Yeah,
because you're insecure, that's not going to go well.
Yeah. No, definitely would not.
Anyway, sorry. Got off track
Well,
there.
so what I was saying is I first found out about you because even before I even started Buffalo Eats, I just wanted to know more about the restaurants in the area. And not restaurants like pub food and wings. I want to know, where can I get Vietnamese? Where can I get Thai? What should I even be trying at these places? I'm starting from square one. And I did a lot of, preliminary research through Buffalo Rising in your articles.
Oh.
And so, I mean, that's how I started having places on my radar. I started writing down wish lists of like, okay, this looks really good. I'm going to try this.
Right.
And so my list is still over 100 restaurants long, and that's just Buffalo. I mean, there's so many places I still haven't gone.
Well, we're fortunate to have a glut of good, independent, solid, restaurants here.
Yes. But how did Buffalo Rising come to be? How did that get started?
Well, Buffalo Rising was this really sort of genius project that was belonged to, from what I understand, to Newell Nussbaumer and his really longtime childhood friend, who's sort of an uber genius, George Johnson. Okay. And the two of them dreamed up this, this website that would use what was then called citizen journalism, which the idea being that, people out on the street are the reporters. And that way you're getting a large amount of very current news from... Yeah. I think that it's important to preface that by saying that in mid-sized cities like Buffalo and smaller cities, and maybe even to some extent larger cities I can't speak for, journalism has really changed because the money involved with journalism has changed, and there aren't reporters on beats anymore. There aren't food writers out hanging out in kitchens and talking to people and then translating that into a story. I mean, that does happen in San Francisco and Boston and places like that. Not happening so much in places like Buffalo and Cleveland. There's just not really a budget for a lot of that stuff. And so citizen journalism made a lot of sense in a lot of ways. At that time, Elmwood is not what it is today. Hurdle is not what it is today. Grant Street is certainly not what it is today. And I think that Buffalo Rising can be credited for really bringing what were little pockets of brilliance happening into the forefront, where they could kind of like grow arms and meet each other and become this whole moment of brilliance, which has really transformed Elmwood and areas surrounding it. Yeah. That's been exciting to watch.
I mean, I lucked out when we started in 2009. It was almost like the bubble had just burst.
Yes.
And when we started it, the first year we were writing, we had the Nelson Star, Anthony Bourdain thing happened.
Right.
Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives was here. There's a lot of talk about media on restaurants.
Right.
We started seeing a lot of new restaurants pop up that were getting a lot of attention. I mean, like Blue Monk. Yep. I was crazy. I mean, even just recently with like Vera we started seeing just people interested. Like, I want to know about all the new restaurants that are open.
Well, and that certainly is new.
Yeah, because I don't have a point of reference because I didn't care before.
Right. Well, and that did happen before, but the number of people who were interested, the type of people who are interested is a completely different type of person today, if you want to type people. People your age care about this now. They certainly didn't. It was really much an older crowd of people who cared about what restaurant was opening and being at the new restaurant. Yeah. And I would say that certainly 2008, 2009, really we saw what was happening in the scene here totally change. Yeah. I mean, as far as an influx of young chefs who were opening their own places and who were doing what they had learned elsewhere. That was when the local food thing really, I don't want to take all the credit for it, but where we really pushed it on people to the point where chefs were like, get out of my restaurant.
Well, Nickel City.
I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Nickel City, that started in 2009 too, right?
Yep. And so, a lot of momentum. And I think that a website like Buffalo Rising definitely plays a role in that because they're first on the ground. They're the first people talking about the new restaurant that's about to open because Newell gets in there when the place is for lease. For Christ's sakes.
I wish sometimes...
He's the scoop king.
I wish I didn't have a job so I could do
but it's also Newell. I mean, he's built...
yeah.
He's... his phone number, it's a thing that a lot of people use a lot often.
Guarantee.
I mean, if you sit down to a single meal with Newell, you will find that you will never have more than 60 seconds of his undivided attention between the number of people who want to come up and shake his hand and meet him or talk to him about something important, and the number of people who are calling him on his phone. It's mayhem, but he's sort of the unofficial mayor of Buffalo. So
I agree. I mean, Buffalo Rising, I check it several times a day.
Absolutely.
I check it constantly.
And so when I met Newell, I met him because I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was kind of hoping that Buffalo Rising, which was brand new, and it was gray and red back then, it looked very different than it does now, would consider adding a expanded type of calendar to its roster of offerings. I thought that I really wanted to be able to know what cool things I could do with my kids. Okay. And so I took me 6 months of pestering Newell to get him to take a meeting with me. And I don't really understand why I cared so much about this at the time, in reflection.
Now that you're thinking about it?
I have no idea why I thought this was a big deal, but I think I was excited about what was happening on Buffalo Rising, and I sensed a change in my neighborhood. I've lived, in the Elmwood Village for 15 years, and I sensed that things were changing, and I think I wanted to find a way to connect to that. And so he and I started talking, and I began telling, he said to me, I only want to do things that are in Buffalo. I don't want to write about anything that's outside of the city of Buffalo. And I want to tell stories about Buffalonians doing really interesting things in Buffalo. And I said, I have this friend, and his name is Rue Buckley, and he owns this restaurant called The Coda, and he's buying all of his food from farmers markets, and he's doing all this great stuff, and you guys should write a story about him. And in typical Newell fashion, he looked at me and said, no, you should write a story about it. And so that began my journey, and I started writing stories, and then I got this wild idea that I could write stories about chefs who were making food using ingredients that were manufactured in Buffalo. So I started calling ingredient manufacturers and asking them if they worked with a chef. So I called Tim Herzog at Flying Bison, and I said, hey, Tim, I know you don't know me from Adam, but I want to write a story about a chef who's using your product. Are there any chefs using your product? And he said, Jim Guarino from Shango makes mussels with my product. And so I walked into Jim's restaurant, and he, of course, was Jim. So he was loving and kind and generous and put up with how crazy and nuts I was so excited about his mussel dish. Anyway, and it just went on from there. And then when Buffalo Rising had the opportunity to become a print magazine several months later, Charlie Quill, who a lot of Buffalonians probably know as a member of the Steam Donkeys, was asked to be an editor. Okay. And he read a piece that I had written and said, I want this girl to be the food editor. And they called me and offered me a job. And that is that. Oh.
Wow.
So I like to say that the world has given me a ton of opportunity, and I'm very lucky, but I've also busted my ass to take advantage of every single one of them.
I mean, that's ingenious, just thinking of calling the manufacturers.
So I always try to think outside the box and look at what other communities that are bigger than ours and perhaps arguably more successful than ours, at least in the food realm, what do they offer? What kind of resources do they have online or in print that is keeping their community together and informing their community and growing their community? And then I try to find a way, if it makes sense, to do that here. Awesome. And so that's that. And then I write a little bit of stuff on top of that.
And that, I mean, I know there's some stuff, I'll talk about Nickel City after this.
Sure.
And then you went from Buffalo Rising to now the food editor.
Well, Buffalo Rising, actually, I was laid off.
Oh, okay.
They, had a lot of changes happen when the magazine, when they stopped printing the magazine, and they went straight to online. Yeah. And the owner, Barry, kept me on a long time. I think I stayed longer than pretty much everybody else. I love that Barry guy. But anyway, so they, so that's when I went and started Feed Your Soul. Okay. Which then became the entity that it is today. I went back to Buffalo Rising maybe a year and a half ago for a couple months to help out when their managing editor left to go somewhere else.
Okay.
And it was then that Elizabeth Licata from Buffalo Spree, who I've been an acquaintance of, but wouldn't say that I knew her very well, came to me and said, we're ready to have a food editor. Will you please be it?
That's awesome.
And I said, hells yeah.
That's got to be like a dream
Oh my God, are you kidding me? It's like the only glossy publication in Buffalo, and it consistently prints high quality articles, and they look at me and say, could you just make a food section? And I say, can I do this and that and this and that? And oh, could I do that? And can I do this too? And they go, sure, go for it. Just make it happen. It's wonderful. I couldn't, it's really, I think of myself as a person sort of charged with doing the right thing and working really hard to bring us to where we deserve to be and to give the spotlight to the farmers and the chefs and the sommeliers and the restaurant owners who deserve that, and to try to grow our food culture here. And I'm really lucky that I get to do that from the platform of Buffalo Spree.
That's awesome.
So, anyway.
I mean, I know for myself that when you went to Buffalo Spree, it drew my attention there that maybe I previously hadn't been looking as far as dining goes.
I'm really excited that Elizabeth and Larry, the publisher, and other people really just trusted me, and I hope after a year they still feel like that was a good choice. But, I think it went from being, one restaurant review and an occasional one or two other articles to now we have, 5 to 7 solid pieces every month.
That's awesome.
So.
Yeah,
and we got more changes in store. So
nice. I've been following your daily or the weekly
my Tuesday tidbits, which
is
like never. They're never tidbits. They're like 5 paragraphs. I'm trying to control myself.
There's no control on the internet.
Well, that's the one thing is there. You do get to kind of. I always feel obliged to tell the whole story, even when maybe it could just be a sentence. But
well, thank you. By the way, I saw today that you mentioned our site in our interview with Mike and Andrew Jeffsky. Oh God,
you're not the only one.
I know. I wanted him to come on here. I figured I should eventually learn his.
Yes, I can now spell his name without having to look it up. I'm very proud of myself. It took a while,
but thank you so much for posting it.
It was my pleasure. It was nice to. It was not that all the other Buffalo foodies that you've profiled aren't interesting. I was one of them. A lot of my friends are on that list. I'm not saying that, but it was nice to see a full on chef.
Yes, I realized maybe halfway through this year that as much as I enjoy showing off a cool band or a website, that maybe it would be appropriate to talk to food people to ask where they go out to eat and things like that. It certainly has given me the best articles that I've had as far as content and things like that.
Right.
Like somebody who got these questions like, I can't wait to answer.
Well, and that's the thing. And, I think that a lot of like I said, a lot of the people we've interviewed, I think, are interesting and fun. Yeah. But for diehard foodies, want to know what the other diehard foodies are thinking. Yeah. So, yeah. No, I think it's great. You're doing a good job. You've come light years from when you first started.
I don't even want to talk about those 2009 posts. Those are embarrassing.
No, you're doing a great job. And I like that you just tell it like it is. And
I try. As much as my knowledge and writing skills will take me.
Yeah, well, you've gotten better with both of those, too. Not that I'm the authority or anything, but I enjoy tuning in and reading what you've got. And you go to a lot of restaurants that I never go to. They're, way out in the suburbs, or they're, like burger joints or whatever, that I really enjoy that. It gives me a frame of reference. So.
We try to branch out, and I'm still, I've only had, Indian food once. Like, I'm still trying to branch out and eat as much as I can. But at the same point, me and my wife will enjoy just getting fries at a dive bar and seeing.
Well, absolutely. And I think the thing that people don't understand, when I was at Buffalo Rising, I didn't have a budget. And, I've never actually really had a budget for myself. So, so you out of pocket all of this stuff.
Yes.
And even if you love to eat out, when I added up all the money I spent those years I worked at Buffalo Rising, it was pretty shocking. Well, but it was in my opinion, it was required. If I look at my time at Buffalo Rising or my time at Buffalo Spree as a body of work, it's required to do the job right.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've been considering keeping receipts for next year, and I'm afraid to to start doing it and seeing exactly how much we're spending.
I don't know. There has to be a way you can write some of that off, doesn't there? I don't know.
I have to write it off against income.
Oh, man. Right.
We don't have any to write off.
Of course.
So, okay. So we skipped a big part, and we skipped the part of Feed Your Soul, which is, does a lot of really cool things and a lot of really awesome events about exposing people to I mean, first and foremost, the farms of Western New York.
That's how
that
it
we
started,
have 7,500, right?
Yeah. 30,500 just in Erie County.
I watched the DVD last night, so
You're taking notes.
I had that on the top of my head. And I mean, me and Allie went to the Elmwood Market tour with Bruce Wysela. And that was cool. I mean, obviously, you're walking through, you have a sense that people really care about what they're selling.
Sure.
But then when you get to actually meet them, and they're like super excited to tell you about everything about their peaches or the duck eggs that they're serving, or
they're just like chefs.
Yes, and
it's the same scenario.
And so I think those events are huge in introducing people to why they should care about eating local and eating and maybe choosing how they cook their home meals a little bit differently, and what restaurant they choose if they're not going to go to Olive Garden that night.
Oh God, we could do a whole episode on Olive Garden.
That'll be the next one.
But I think, when I started Feed Your Soul, the idea had actually come to me several months before Buffalo Rising had to let me go. And so it wasn't started out of desperation or anything. But it started because I realized, number one, there was nobody doing food events that I felt really reflected like a heightened foodie sensibility.
So basically that you would want to go to?
I didn't want to eat food out of like a chafing dish on a styrofoam plate. I was like, there's a place for that, but there has to be something else too.
Okay.
And I knew that I couldn't afford to go to every $150 dinner that my chef friends were hosting, and I wanted there to be something besides dinner. I felt like there was an opportunity to do. We have so many events, especially if you look at like summertime in Buffalo. I mean, there's 20 things to do every day, and I just thought there has to be something cool to do that doesn't have anything to do with like styrofoam or restaurants dropping off like tinfoil things of baked ziti. Like, it just Okay, so there was that, and then there was the desire to further doing what I found myself surprisingly doing at Buffalo Rising, which was to celebrate, expose, and educate sort of along the journey, to say, and that happened because, for example, like Louis Zangi, who's this great French trained chef, looking at me and saying, correct? Yeah, he's not there anymore, but he was, he was at La Metro, he was at a lot of places back in the day, looking at me and saying, I can't sell a rabbit special to save my life. And it breaks my heart. I spent all this time, I put a rabbit special on the menu, can't talk one person into buying a rabbit special. And I thought, what the hell is that all about? Like, we consider ourselves an eating community, and yet, we're only willing to eat at a certain level. We're only willing to celebrate, pierogies and hot dogs and stuff, and there's a place for that, but there were chefs doing really great stuff. Yeah. So Feed Your Soul really came out of both of those things. Nice. And
so, I mean, I think the big event that has come from that has been Nickel City Chef, which has been, in my opinion, extremely successful. How quickly did you sell out of season tickets last year?
Less than 36 hours.
Yeah. And this isn't like an intimate gathering of 20 people.
No, it's about anywhere between 180 and 200 people, although we might trim it back a little bit this year just to make people more comfortable.
Okay. Oh, were they sitting on top of each other?
We've even talked about moving it to a bigger venue, but it just doesn't make sense because the chefs, part of the reason why they can do what they do is because they're working in state-of-the-art kitchens.
Oh my God!
And if you put them on a butane burner on it, like the stage at Studio Arena, it's going to lose something in the translation.
I've gone from when I worked in retail, I was in electronics, and I've gone from going places and looking at TVs and electronics and thinking like I need all that, to now every time I go into Artisan Kitchen, I've literally turned the switch of going like, oh, I wish I had a 70-inch plasma, to like, oh my God, do you see that stove?
Yeah. It's true. And that's sort of the purpose of having the event there for them, for sure,
Yeah. You see these amazing, pieces of machinery that they're using, and it's...
But I have to backtrack really quick because actually I think the most important event that Feed Your Soul has ever done is in 2008. We took 30 chefs on a bus to 4 farms.
Wow.
And none of those chefs, if I can recall correctly, were sourcing locally.
Wow.
And some of them now, support entire farms. And so that was really, I mean, just...
Now, is that... I mean, that was obviously under the radar. That wasn't like a...
That wasn't publicized.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was before. I mean, it was just for chefs.
How did you get all these? I mean...
Because, well, I've been kind of talking about it for a couple months. I've been like, did you go down to the farmer's market? Oh my God, you can't believe this corn I saw. Rah, 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 rah. And so finally I said, you know what? Nobody's going to believe me. And I can't afford to buy a basket of food from every farmer and take it to every restaurant, which would have also worked.
Yeah.
So I, made it sound really exciting and exotic and fun.
Going to a farm.
And we put them on a bus with no air conditioning and the windows wouldn't go down.
And how far was the drive?
It was a drive. Because I wanted to take them to the best farm. So we went to Daniel Ohl's place, also known as Promised Land CSA in Alden.
Okay.
We went to White Cow Dairy all the way in Cattaraugus. We went to Native Offerings. I mean, we went... Oh, God, there's one other place, too, but I can't remember.
It was like a greatest hits.
It was. And to see these chefs, it was like... It was... One of the closest things I've seen to like a religious experience, to be honest with you, to see chefs who are all acting a little macho because they're in a bus with their peers, right? And they don't want to be like acting like they don't know stuff or asking questions in front of their peers, right? Yeah. So there's a little bit of ego thing there.
Yeah.
And we walk through a field and probably, 2 of them had ever been in a field full of food before.
Wow.
And to just see the revelation.
Oh my God.
And they're like, it was really, I mean, I went home and cried.
This would have been like,
terrible.
Oh my God, this would have been like the greatest documentary.
I should have brought a camera. That's what I said afterwards.
It
was really amazing. And we've put so many farms in the black. We've changed the way so many farms do business and the way consumers look at a menu in Buffalo. And I don't think, like I said, I can't take credit for all of that, but I think that really, taking the best of the best chefs out and having them be exposed to this and trying to come up with alternatives for how they could get this food into their restaurant. Some of them have been very successful with it. Some of them have struggled to make it work. There's a lot of things needed here in Buffalo to really make the local food thing happen, like distribution and that sort of stuff. But really, I mean, that's the most important thing I've ever done.
Well, all right.
So sorry to backtrack. But
No, I understand. Well, I mean, clearly that is a bigger, cultural significance, I guess.
I think
the area.
so. Yeah. But most people don't know about that. They just eat
it. No. Well, I mean, that's kind of like, what's underneath Nickel City Chef okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, which they should,
it's okay.
It's basically, the easiest way to say it is it's Buffalo's version of Iron Chef. But maybe the difference a little bit is that, first of all, you have 4 Nickel City chefs right now.
Correct.
Christa Van Wagner from
Curly's, Adam Getz from Sample, Brian Meadis from Bacchus, and JJ Richard from Torches.
Okay. And they challenge...
They are challenged by applicants who are chefs from other independent restaurants.
Okay, and for each challenge, they have to use a secret ingredient, and that secret ingredient is always a local.
It always comes from a local farmer manufacturer. I mean, I try to use the tiniest farm I can find.
That's awesome.
That's sort of my goal. And, that position of being a secret ingredient sort of can't be paid for. Yeah. It's really based on who's doing it right and who's doing it well, and then they have to cook. The chefs have to, once the secret ingredient is revealed, cook 3 dishes in the course of an hour featuring the secret ingredient, and then they are scored by a panel of judges, 3 judges, and they are scored by taste, plating, use of the secret ingredient. There's at least one other thing in there I'm not remembering, but anyway, and then there's a winner. So that's how it works.
And this is all in front of an audience
of 200 people. About.
Yeah. And this is at Artisan Kitchens and Bath, which is on the west side.
It's an old stove factory on the west side.
You could drive by this place and never once guess.
I drove by it 100 times. Yeah. 1,000 times.
The first time I went, which was for Lloyd's birthday party.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, well, clearly there's like 100 cars here, so this is it. But like, you would drive by and be like, no, that's not it. Right. And you go inside and it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. They've done an amazing job inside there.
It's unbelievable. We feel like we're very privileged to be there.
I mean, for somebody who's going in there for a competition, it seems like professional. Like this could be on Food Network. Like that's
and to be honest with you, those are the biggest compliments that I feel we've received is when somebody like my now friend, former acquaintance Ivy Knight, who's a chef and a food writer. She works on a Food Network show in Canada. She she said, Christa, this would easily be at home in Toronto. This would easily be at home, anywhere that I've been or anything that I've seen. And it's like, that's what we want to hear. Yeah. We want people from Toronto's, like the hippest, she's from like the hippest section of dining in Toronto. All her friends are chefs. She runs with a really crazy crowd to come down here and go, man, you guys do it right and you do it really professional. And awesome. I didn't see a chicken wing anywhere all weekend. That's what we want to hear.
That's awesome. And so now, you're going into
season 4.
Season 4. Now, tickets, for people who are listening to this the day we release it.
Yeah, January 6th.
Yeah, until January 6th. So 3 days they have.
Yep, at noon.
And they go fast.
They go really fast. And they're on, so nickelcitychef.com. That's the trick. Okay. You got to go there.
Okay. And last year they went in 36 hours. I would be pretty confident to say that's going to be less time this year.
I don't, it depends how well I can press-wise get the announcement out there. I sort of hope they last a little bit longer because people get really discouraged. I feel terrible. I get these emails from people who are like, I tried for 3 hours to get tickets. It's all my mother wanted to do this year, and I feel terrible. And in fact, season 2, we had so many people from season 1 who were upset that they didn't know about it or that they didn't get tickets, complain that in season 2 we tried to do double the shows in order to make everyone happy. But what I didn't really take into consideration is that the show doesn't make enough money to do 8 shows. And I was in the red when we finished that season.
And also must have been just drained of all.
Well, we were all exhausted. Really exhausted. Yeah. And so I think as much as we'd like to do more shows, I guess most people who do promotions and production of events would tell me that I'm really lucky that there are people who still want tickets at the end of the day.
I see.
And that I shouldn't feel bad about it. But that's my nature, is to feel guilty about the fact that not everybody who wants to go can go.
It's an awesome event. Unfortunately, I can't speak of firsthand experience. I've only watched the clips that are shot by Nate afterwards.
I'm shaming you with my heavy sigh.
You should. I feel horrible about it. For somebody who writes a food blog, I haven't been to the coolest food event that our city has to offer. But I promise you, this year I will go to at least one event.
Oh, yeah, it would be great to have you there.
I will be there.
So, yeah, we're excited. I'm excited. This year, we thought a little bit about totally changing up the event and doing it very differently, and for just a season, pitching the whole format and doing something wild and risky. And but then it became very clear to me that the book has brought us an audience of people who didn't know we existed before. Yeah. And they really are coming to see this format that they see laid out in the book.
The book that you're talking about is the cookbook that was just released a month ago.
Yeah, October 25th.
Oh, 2 months ago. Wow.
Yeah, we've sold a lot of them. We're really lucky.
There's one right there.
Yeah. We're really, really lucky. Buffalo Heritage did, and Jim Charlier, the designer, they did a fabulous job with it. It is
very, very nice. I've looked at the recipes. I don't think I'm going to be attempting any of them anytime soon. But, the whole layout, the whole story of it, and the whole bio of each chef. When I did my article with Mike, I used your book as a point of reference because I knew a little bit about him, but
so
I didn't know, full story and everything like that. And the DVD, I know Nate a little bit.
Nate Persini is the director of that.
Yeah, I met him when I met Nelson Starr. They were together for True Blue Buffalo at the time. But he's an incredibly talented videographer.
He is, and he's moving to Hawaii. Buffalo will sorely miss him.
That. Yeah, I've been trying to get him on the site as a Buffalo foodie for 6 months.
Oh yeah, well he just came back. He's been in Oahu. Yeah, so he's working on a really interesting project.
Narrow windows every time he's in town.
He's tough. He's tough, but he's really talented. He's definitely going places. The footage he's produced for us, both in the movie and I think online with the on nickelcitychef.com, where we've produced. Seasons 2 and 3 really easily you could see that on any television station.
I love when they get posted because I put them on my site. Yeah, the second they get posted because I think they're great. They look so nice.
He's really done a great job of showcasing what we do, and it's really fun because we hear from people who apply to compete in the challenges but have never been to a show, and I'll say man, I don't know if I'd be applying to this if I'd never been to a show before. They're I've watched every video 15 times. Oh, okay. Maybe you don't need me then. I'll call you later.
That's kind of where I was gonna go. How have you seen the applicants increase since this has started?
You know what? We haven't seen the number of applicants increase, but we've seen the quality of applicants improve greatly. Okay. And that sounds really terrible because it's a value judgment based strictly on someone based on their, their paperwork or whatever. Yeah. But as far as why they want to compete, where they've worked before, and what kind of influences they have. We've really seen that grow.
Do you have do you actually have to eliminate people? Like, do you get more than?
Yes, we get. Yeah, there are people who don't every year we send.
Is that
thank
all
you so
on
much,
you?
Dear John letters too?
Is that all you that has to decide that, or do you have
a lot of it is based sheerly on availability.
Oh, okay.
I have to be just completely honest. I have a staunch rule that there will be no vendetta, axe grinding sort of stuff at my event because we've had that happen before. It makes it very unpleasant for even the audience because it really changes the tone of the whole event.
Yeah.
And so if it is clear that someone has an axe to grind or that somebody is there because they need to prove something to themselves not in a positive way, I just can't can't do that.
That has to come across. I feel like food that is made out of vengeance does not taste as good as food that is made out of happiness and
I'll
joy.
tell you, the whole audience feels it. We all feel it, and it really makes it unpleasant.
Yeah.
There might be a place for that. I've been to a couple guerrilla sort of in the middle of the night chef events. And there's,
Do you have to know a password to get into the door?
They're like, who's the crazy white girl? Yeah. No, and there's the place for that.
Yeah.
Where everybody's had maybe a little bit too much to drink and shouldn't be wielding knives, but do anyway. That's a fun thing.
This needs to be filmed.
This has an audience. You can't do that. These people don't understand the rules of chefdom.
For some reason, when you were talking about that, I could imagine in Zoolander where they have the model off and it's in a dark alley, they have to go into this club. I just imagine these two chefs just going at it that.
I don't think any of them would like to picture themselves that way, but
never be referenced with Zoolander.
So we do have to, every year there are more applicants than we have space for, because it also depends, not only are there any axes to grind that we have to kind of keep an eye out for, but also what dates the chefs who are applying are available for, and if those dates match up with the chef that they want to compete against, because sometimes people will write that they only want to compete against one chef.
Okay.
And other times they want to compete against all 4 chefs, or they're not available on this date. So
now, do you have a rule that the previous challengers cannot compete again? Or
well, how it works is if you win against a Nickel City chef, you get to come back the next season and be a judge.
Oh, okay.
If you don't win, we will eventually, I think maybe next year, have some rematches.
Okay, yeah.
Or the opportunity for people to come back and challenge a different chef. I haven't really sorted all that out in my noggin yet, but that's sort of where we're going.
Okay.
There's definitely some rematches that would be really fun. I think for everybody. So
cool.
So no, it's not all on me. I sort through all of that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like dates and who's available and all that. And then I really seek the counsel of the Nickel City chefs, and really Mike Andrzejewski. He is really very helpful with me in that regard. And we sort of think about, who does the audience want to see? What do they recognize the chef or the restaurant where the chef is from? And will they be as excited for them as they will be for the Nickel City chef? The first year, we have an audience vote. So the audience gets to vote. It's only worth 1 point, but it has been really integral point.
Yeah, I've seen the scores.
Yes. Yeah. And so the first year, I don't think anybody necessarily knew who the Nickel City chefs were, but they were voting for the Nickel City, voting for the home team. I love Buffalo. Voting for the home team even though they don't know who the home team is. And so that was really interesting. Well, the next year we saw it be completely different. The next year, I think in almost every case, the audience point went to the challenger. And then this year it was sort of mixed up. But
Buffalo does love an underdog.
They do. And I think, another reason why I did Nickel City Chef, besides wanting to do a really great event that any highbrow sort of snooty foodie, like I kind of consider myself that way, so don't say that out loud though, would appreciate, and a way to sort of highlight what chefs can do when they're not being forced to make chicken Caesar salad for $400, and what farms can do when you really give them the opportunity. More than that was realizing that we don't really have celebrity chefs in Buffalo, and I would look at other magazines from other mid-sized cities like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and Detroit, and I don't know, the middle of nowhere in Alabama, and they would have celebrity chefs on the cover of their magazines, and they were their celebrities. I wouldn't know who they were, but they were the top chef of that town. And really, I think there's only one person who's ever had that role here in Buffalo, and it's Mike.
Yeah.
And not that he doesn't deserve it, because he sure as hell does, but he, there's room for others. And the only way we were ever going to be taken seriously as a food town beyond, burgers, was to have some fine dining chefs that people could recognize when they're like on the cover of a magazine or walking through a store.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting there. You know, we're definitely getting there.
No, I think that idea is changing. I mean, nationwide, I think more people are interested in chefs and what they're doing. And,
absolutely.
And I think that's definitely bleeding into Buffalo. Because, I mean, as soon as I started it, I didn't even think about knowing the chef.
Yeah.
Like, when I started eating food, it never occurred to me like that.
There's a dude in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Who was like driving the whole thing. Yeah.
I mean, I thought about like, oh, it's really cool. There's a bunch of people back there making the food. But it never occurred to me that there was a person who this was their vision.
Right.
Or
well,
like,
and sad to say, I'll just say, there are a lot of restaurants in Buffalo where that's not the case.
True. Very true.
But I think it's becoming increasingly the case.
Yeah,
and the customer is demanding it. And
Yeah.
so it's been really fun because I think that what's happening on a national level with people finding food as a hobby, food as a passion, the people associated with food, the adventure with food. I mean, like every version of how you could use food and be interested in food is out there now in a magazine, on a cookbook, on television. And so that has all happened sort of simultaneously to us really coming into our own and actually having great food to talk about.
Yeah.
And that we couldn't have asked really for better timing between that and the local food movement and everything else. I mean, this is a very exciting time, and this will sound a little maybe arrogant, but if you think about the idea of like, when the Ramones and all those guys were making like great music and it was slow for people to understand what great music they were making, or when you think about, anybody sort of like this group of people who come together and are part of an experience that is shared by more than one person.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol's whole deal and all these groups of people. I would like to think of the Buffalo food scene for the last 3 years and for however many coming years being made up of people who are like working on something together, who have this symbiotic relationship that is all full of momentum and excitement. And I can't wait to see where we are 5 years from now. I just can't freaking wait.